what happens when music refuses to tell you who made it? I mean, imagine walking into an art gallery.
Okay.
You step into this pristine white room, right? And on the far wall, there's this brilliant, incredibly complex, just massive painting. It's totally overwhelming.
Sure.
But the very first thing you do isn't actually to look at the brush strokes or, the use of color. You look down.
You look for the plaque.
Exactly. You look for that little white plaque on the wall next to it. You want the signature, the name, the dates, maybe a little paragraph explaining the artist's traumatic childhood or their political awakening.
Right. We want the context.
Yeah, we rely on the artist's identity to tell us how we're supposed to feel about the art itself. But imagine standing in front of that overwhelming canvas and there is no plaque.
Just the blank wall.
Just the wall. There's no signature, absolutely nothing to tell you who made it, why they made it, or what it even means. So when we transition that experience into audio, what happens when a piece of sound entirely strips away the identity of its creator?
I mean, it creates an immediate sense of vertigo. Truly. Yeah. We are so thoroughly conditioned to search for the who long before we process the what.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In almost all the media we consume, the creator's identity acts as an anchor. It grounds our expectations. So when you take that away, the listener is left suspended in midair, just entirely unmoored.
And that feeling of being unmoored is exactly the mission for today's deep dive. We are exploring this really fascinating text titled Engine de Poitrine and the Politics of Anonymity in Sound.
It's a great piece.
It really is. We're going to examine this radical shift in how we experience audio by looking at a situation where the creator just completely disappears. No names, no faces, no behind-the-scenes studio footage on social media.
Right, none of that.
Just the raw architecture of sound. So to set the scene for us, what exactly are we looking at here?
Well, the focal point here is a project coming out of Quebec known as Engine de Poitrine. Though, honestly, calling it a project or a band, it feels entirely inadequate given how it actually operates.
How so?
Well, there's no public front person. There are no confirmed biographies, no press shots, no liner notes detailing, who played what instrument.
Wow. Literally nothing.
Nothing. You cannot look up an interview to find out what the lead single is really about.
Yep.
There is absolutely no stable narrative that you can cling to as a listener. Instead, you are just confronted with total, impenetrable opacity.
Okay, but to play devil's advocate for a second here, this isn't exactly a brand new concept, right? I mean, we've seen pop stars wear giant helmets or, producers use animated avatars to build up mystique.
Sure, yeah.
In those cases, the secret identity basically becomes the marketing campaign. We all just spend months on Reddit trying to guess who is under the mask.
And that is a really crucial distinction to make. In mainstream music, a mask is a public relations tool. The mystery is the brand.
Right, it's a hype generator.
Exactly. But the opacity surrounding Engine de Poitrine, it's not a marketing gimmick to drive up engagement. It is a deliberate, foundational, compositional decision.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, anonymity in this context is a structural element of the work itself.
Mm-hmm.
The absence of an author is literally playing a part in the music. It carries just as much weight as, say, a synthesizer, a guitar, or a drum machine would.
So if we completely surgically remove identity from the music, if there's no human story, no celebrity persona to anchor ourselves to, does the music become freer or does it just become incredibly unstable and difficult to process?
That tension is exactly what makes this approach so radical. Because to navigate that tension, you have to undergo this massive paradigm shift in how you fundamentally understand music. You have to stop viewing audio as expression.
Okay, wait. When you say expression, you mean the traditional model, right?
Yeah.
Where music is just a vehicle for a person to tell you a story.
Right, exactly. I mean, for centuries, we have treated music as an expressive medium. An artist experiences a profound emotion, heartbreak, joy, anger at the political system. And they encode that feeling into a sequence of chords and lyrics.
And then we listen to it to feel what they felt.
Yes. We as the audience listen to the song to decode and receive that feeling. We're essentially communing with the artist's soul. But with Engine de Poitrine, you have to abandon that expressive model entirely. You have to start viewing music not as expression, but as structure.
Structure, like architecture. Like looking at a massive, brutalist concrete building instead of reading someone's diary entry?
That is the perfect way to look at it. A concrete pillar doesn't have feelings.
Right.
It has weight, it has density, it has a structural purpose.
Right.
So when you apply that to sound, you stop listening for an emotional narrative and you start experiencing the physical properties of the audio itself.
Okay, but what does music as structure actually sound like when you put your headphones on? Because if I'm used to, a lead singer guiding me through a verse and a chorus, a purely structural piece of audio sounds like it would be incredibly disorienting.
Oh, it is deeply disorienting, entirely by design. And it starts with a complete elimination of a center.
Meaning what exactly?
Well, think about how a traditional pop or rock song is mixed. The human voice is almost always placed dead center, right? And it's usually the loudest element. The drums, the bass, the guitars, they all exist just to support the vocal. There's a very clear hierarchy.
Yeah, the singer is the star.
Right. But Angine de Poitrine flattens that hierarchy completely. There is no dominant voice. There's no lead melody that's meant to catch your ear and stick in your head.
Wait, if there's no melody and no dominant voice, what am I actually listening to? Usually as a listener, I lock onto the melody and I follow it. I track it as it builds up to the chorus and then resolves. Without that, wouldn't I just be adrift?
You would be adrift if you were trying to follow it.
Mm.
But the text argues that this type of music isn't meant to be followed.
Okay.
When there's no center, you can't track a linear path from point A to point B.
Hmm.
The audio totally removes your orientation. You can't follow this music. You can only enter it.
Entering a piece of music rather than following it, it feels much more immersive, but also a bit intimidating. If I enter a space with no center, no melody, no clear path forward, doesn't the sound just fall apart into random chaos?
That's where the concept of controlled instability comes into play. It doesn't collapse into chaos because the elements of the sound are highly designed to interact with each other in very specific, tense ways.
Okay, so it's not just random noise.
Not at all. Instead of hearing a structured chord progression that eventually resolves and makes you feel satisfied,
Yeah.
you hear systems of sound interacting like unpredictable weather patterns. For example, a massive part of this sound relies on drifting frequencies.
Drifting frequencies. Okay, break the mechanics of that down for me. How does a producer create a drifting frequency, and why does it feel so unstable to the listener?
So normally when you play a synthesizer in a pop song, the pitch is digitally locked to a grid. If you hit a C note, it plays a mathematically perfect C. It's stable, it's dependable. But here, the oscillators inside the synthesizers are left unquantized. They aren't locked to any grid. So as the sound sustains over 10 or 20 seconds, the pitch begins to slowly sag, bend, and warp.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, almost like a record melting in the sun. And because your brain expects the note to stay perfectly flat, this slow, inevitable pitch bending creates a genuine feeling of vertigo.
So your brain is constantly trying to find solid ground, but the ground keeps tilting.
Exactly. And that vertigo is amplified by something called microtonal friction.
Microtonal friction.
Yeah. Western music is built on 12 distinct notes. Think of the keys on a piano, but microtones exist in the cracks between those piano keys. When you play two frequencies that are incredibly close together, say just a fraction of a hertz apart, the sound waves physically interfere with one another in the air.
They clash.
They clash, and they create this acoustic phenomenon called beating. The sound actually starts to rhythmically wobble and throb. It's not just an aesthetic choice. It's a physical reality of the sound waves compressing and expanding.
That sounds intense.
It is. It creates an involuntary biological response of unease. The sound never settles into a comfortable, recognizable chord, but crucially, it never totally collapses into white noise either. A very deliberate, mathematically controlled imbalance.
Okay, I have to push back here on behalf of anyone listening who might be feeling a bit exhausted just thinking about this.
Fair enough.
If I put my headphones on and there's no melody, no center, the ground is constantly tilting due to drifting frequencies, and the sound waves are physically clashing to create biological unease, isn't that just a really stressful room? Like, is this even music anymore, or is it just an audio endurance test?
That is a completely natural reaction.
Yeah.
The desire to categorize this as an endurance test happens because we're still trying to evaluate it using the old metric of music as entertainment.
Right, we're looking for a good time.
Exactly. But we have to reframe the experience entirely. It's no longer music as a narrative or, a catchy tune to tap your foot to. We have to start thinking of it as an environment, specifically a system that behaves like a space under stress.
A space under stress. What does that actually look like in the real world?
Think about standing in a dense, ancient forest right before a massive thunderstorm breaks. The barometric pressure suddenly drops.
Oh, yeah, you can feel that in the air.
Right. The wind starts moving the canopy in violent, unpredictable ways. There's a literal static charge humming in the air, and the temperature plummets. You aren't listening to a song in that forest. You aren't tapping your foot to the rhythm of the wind.
No, definitely not.
You are simply existing within a highly pressurized physical environment. That feeling of spatial tension, where the atmosphere is occupying the space rather than just filling it, that is exactly what Engine de Poitrine is constructing with sound.
That makes profound sense. It's an atmospheric pressure field. But that leads to a massive philosophical question. If I am standing in that sonic forest inside this environment under stress, how on earth am I supposed to interpret it? Like, there's no one there to tell me what it means.
And we are back to the core concept, the total absence of identity. Because there is no creator standing in front of you, there's no emotional instruction.
Emotional instruction, meaning we're incredibly used to the artist acting as a tour guide for our feelings.
Exactly.
A singer crying into the microphone while playing a minor piano chord is instructing you, the listener, to feel sad, or a fast, aggressive punk guitar riff is instructing you to feel hyped up and rebellious. We are constantly being given emotional blueprints.
Precisely. We are, in many ways, quite lazy listeners.
I mean, I definitely am.
We enjoy being handed the emotional blueprint. But when you completely erase the identity of the artist, that instruction manual is thrown entirely out the window. Only the structure remains. The artist is no longer there to say, this track represents my struggle with isolation, or this sound is meant to be terrifying. You're left alone with the architecture.
It's like being handed a complex, heavily disassembled piece of machinery. There's no box, no picture of what it's supposed to look like, and absolutely no instruction manual. You aren't being told what the machine does. You just have to sit there on the floor with all these gears and springs and figure it out entirely on your own.
That's a compelling image, but I would actually refine that analogy a bit to better fit the physical mechanism of this music.
Okay, refine away.
It's almost less like a disassembled machine, because that implies you're trying to put pieces together to build a traditional, recognizable object. It's more like stepping into an active wind tunnel.
The wind tunnel. Wow.
Yeah, you aren't trying to build anything. You're just standing there feeling the sheer aerodynamic force of the sound pushing against you.
Oh, I like that much better. You are just experiencing the physics of the space.
Right. And this highlights a strange, almost paradoxical reversal. In mainstream music, identity is what creates meaning. We care deeply about a pop star's heartbreak anthem because we know their biography, right?
Yeah.
We know they just went through a public divorce.
The context generates the meaning.
But here, the removal of identity forces a massive shift in how meaning is generated.
It shifts the burden of meaning entirely onto you, the listener.
Exactly. You are forced out of a passive role and into an incredibly active one. You are no longer sitting back on your couch receiving a prepackaged emotion from a celebrity. You have to construct the emotion yourself based on how your unique psychology and biology react to the pressure, the instability, and the friction.
So the meaning doesn't disappear, it just moves.
Exactly. Anonymity doesn't strip meaning away from the music, it relocates the meaning. It takes the power out of the hands of the artist and drops it squarely into the lap of the listener.
So practically speaking, what does the actual physical experience of listening to this entail? Because stepping into a sonic wind tunnel and having the burden of meaning dropped into your lap, that sounds like a tall order for a Tuesday afternoon.
It is a tall order, and the transition is rarely smooth. If you actually put on a pair of high-quality headphones and hit play on a track like this, the first 5 minutes are usually deeply uncomfortable.
I can imagine.
You feel physically unanchored. Your brain is desperately searching for a pattern. You're waiting for a drum beat to drop or a voice to come in and save you, to give you a recognizable rhythm to latch onto. And when it never arrives, you feel a genuine sense of frustration.
Just wanting it to make sense.
Right. A lot of people feel an intense biological urge to hit the skip button and find something safe.
So it's almost like a physiological adaptation is required, like stepping from a bright hallway into a pitch black room.
Yes, exactly.
At first, you're entirely blind, you're disoriented, maybe even a little panicked. You're straining your eyes to see the normal things you're used to seeing, the furniture, the walls. But if you force yourself to stay in the room long enough, you stop trying to see colors and find details. You just wait for your pupils to dilate. And eventually, this biological surrender happens. You start to see the subtle shapes and the shadows moving in the dark.
Yes, that is a brilliant way to conceptualize the adaptation process. The listening experience totally mirrors that biological surrender. At around the 5 or 6 minute mark, your brain finally gives up the exhausting search for a melody that isn't there. And the moment you stop fighting the music, your perception shifts. You start tracking entirely new elements.
You start seeing the shapes in the dark. What are those shapes in this context?
What you start noticing the subtle drops in atmospheric pressure. You notice the density shifts in the low-end frequencies. You start picking up on the incredibly tiny micro variations in tone that you would have completely ignored if a lead singer had been belting over them.
Oh, right, because they would have drowned it out.
Exactly. You begin to map the spatial placement of the static and the hum.
You essentially learn to speak a completely new auditory language in real time.
You do. And at the precise moment of that adaptation, when your pupils finally dilate to the dark, the entire experience transforms. The music stops being an object that you're observing and judging from the outside, and it becomes a field that you exist within. You're no longer listening to the sound, you're inhabiting it.
That is a staggering way to interact with art. So pulling all of these threads together, what does this all mean? Ultimately, what is Ange de Poitrine? If we synthesize everything we've unpacked about structure, instability, and anonymity, how do we define it?
The conclusion we arrive at from the text is that Ange de Poitrine is not a band. It's not a marketing strategy. It's not even really a genre. It is, at its core, a profound question.
And the question is, what remains of sound when human identity is entirely removed from it?
Precisely. And the answer is not just empty silence. What remains is an immensely powerful architecture. It's structure without a center. It's instability without collapse. It is sound without instruction.
It's a completely self-sustaining ecosystem of audio. But, I imagine this philosophy extends far beyond just one obscure project from Quebec. This feels like a logic that could bleed into massive areas of culture.
Oh, it absolutely does. This isn't an isolated anomaly at all. If you expand this logic, you see the exact same principles operating in the global rise of noise music, in underground industrial techno, and in any audio system where the physical tension itself becomes the composition.
So it's part of something bigger.
Right. Enter de Poitrine is just a pure distillation of a much larger cultural shift. We're seeing a growing movement of sound that actively rejects the cult of personality. It rejects the obsession with the artist's biography and embraces only the raw, physical reality of structure, pressure, and sound.
That is wild to think about, especially given the deeply personality-driven culture we navigate every single day, which actually leads me to a final thought I want to leave you, the listener, with today. We've spent this entire deep dive looking at how stripping away a creator's identity forces you to step up and actively construct the meaning of the environment yourself. You have to feel the pressure, the shifts, and the friction without anyone holding your hand and telling you how to feel about them. But if we apply that exact same centerless logic to our daily lives, lives that are incredibly hypersaturated with personal brands, influencers, pundits, and identity-driven media, what would happen? What if tomorrow you tried a completely centerless approach to consuming information? If you temporarily stripped the who away from the news articles you read, the social media posts you scroll past, or the videos you watch, and you just looked at the raw structure of the information itself, what hidden pressures and tensions might you suddenly start noticing? When you take away the name on the byline, when you take away the plaque on the gallery wall, you might just find that the real meaning was hiding in the structure all along. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's been an absolute mind-bender of a journey. Next time you find yourself listening to something new, maybe close your eyes, forget who made it, and see what the architecture of the sound itself instructs you to do. Until next time.